Hello and welcome to a couple of days in the life of my sourdough micro bakery. I am so glad that you are joining me today. My name is Macy. I am a micro bakery owner. I'm a mother to two sweet little girls that are 2 and 3. I am a wife. I'm a homemaker. And I love sharing my life and my journey as a micro bakery owner with you guys. I love sharing all the tips and tricks that I've learned along the way and just give you some insight into what this life and this rhythm is like for us. It's pretty unique, but it works so well for us, and it's been such a huge blessing to our family. And I just love being able to share some of the little things here and there that I've learned along the way with you guys as I continue to learn myself. So this particular day is Tuesday, which is really when my bakery prep starts. So this is early in the morning in this particular clip. And what I'm doing here is I am pre-measuring all of my flour that I will use for tomorrow's dough day. And now before we get any further into today's video, I want to give a big thanks to the sponsor of today's video, which is Munbin. And we're going to go ahead and take a second and hear about my amazing thermal printer that I use every single week in my micro bakery. Thank you so much to Munbin for sponsoring this portion of today's video. I'm incredibly excited to share about my thermal printer for Munbin with you guys because this is something that I use every single week in my micro bakery, so it was kind of a no-brainer collaboration. I use my thermal printer every week in my bakery to print all of the labels for all of the goodies that I sell. So I print mine on 3x5 labels. I designed these in Adobe Illustrator, but you could also do it in something like Canva. And then I take the finished product, send it to my phone as a PDF. I use the Munbin app to Bluetooth connect to this printer right here, and I'm able to have it printing in a matter of seconds. It's so easy, so seamless, it prints very quickly. And one of my favorite things about this is that it is gonna save you so much money to print on a thermal printer because it doesn't use any ink. It's a no-brainer really if you're looking to make a more cost-effective choice for your micro bakery. Another amazing benefit of it is that they are waterproof. So I do porch pickups as a micro baker, which means that my loaves are outside and exposed to the elements. So I love knowing that no matter what happens, my loaves and the labels on them are not going to bleed or smear or anything like that. So it's very, very reliable. I also like to use round labels to print QR codes that link to my ordering platform. So I will have those posted around my pickup stations. So if anybody stops by and wants to know how to order from me, they can quickly grab the link that way. It's incredibly versatile. I also love that the Munbin app has a ton of pre-made designs. So if you want to print something really quick and don't want to design it yourself, you can go straight there and print from a ton of different options, thousands of different designs. Thank you so much to Munbin for sponsoring this portion of today's video. They did give me a discount for you guys, so I will have an 8% discount link in the description box below. If you're looking to try it out, this is a great option. It comes in lots of beautiful colors. As you can see, I have my little purple and pink setup here, which I love, and I am so thankful to them. Thank you, Munbin, for sponsoring today's video, and let's get back into today's content. All right, jumping right back into my prep day. Pre-measuring all of my flour the day before I actually mix my dough is super helpful because there's a 0% chance that I want to be measuring things to precision at like 3:30 in the morning, which is when I start mixing my dough. It also saves me a lot of time. Just doing this all at once is just way more efficient than measuring each batch as I go. I found that I am much less likely to make errors as I'm measuring up my ingredients if I do it ahead of time. So I like to just stay one step ahead of myself, especially as a busy mother. That's really kind of the key to success, always being a step ahead of yourself. I do a lot of stuff before my girls wake up for the day, which is what you're seeing right here. So at this point, my girls were still asleep. It was probably around 7 o'clock in the morning or so. So I was cutting a little bit close. They typically wake up at 7:30, but I try to get as much done as I possibly can. As you can see, I made a bit of a mess. Measuring all this flour is quite the adventure, but this is what works best for me. So I always pre-measure my flour. I also pre-measure my salt and any other odds and ends ingredients. So for example, I add olive oil and honey to my sandwich loaves, so I'll pre-measure that as well. If I'm able to pre-measure it, I do, because it just makes a world of a difference. Now, since we moved into this home, which we moved into it at the end of June, I also have an employee now. My sister works for me 20 hours a week, which was a very new thing for me, but it has been a huge blessing. So Tuesdays are prep days in the bakery, and my assistant really does the majority of it. So I take care of pre-measuring all of the flour. I also will print the labels for all of the packaging that I need. But then my assistant also comes from 9 to 3, and she will prep all of the cookie dough. She'll also prep all of the scone dough, and she does cleaning and a few little odds and ends types of stuff, lots of dishes and things of that nature. So those ticket items like the cookie dough and the scones used to be my responsibility, and I just would do them at other points throughout the week to spread out the workload so that I was able to do things like during my girls' naps or before or after bedtime. So it's been a huge blessing to have some of that time back and just be able to focus more on my kids and on my home. So Tuesdays are pretty light as far as bakery work goes for me, and it's a little bit heavier for my bakery assistant. Okay, this is now the next morning. So this clip right here was filmed at around 3:30 in the morning, and I am getting my first load of bread into my commercial mixer. I use a 30-quart Estella spiral mixer for my bakery. Getting one of these mixers was essential for me because I started developing wrist issues from hand mixing all my dough. I was hand mixing my loaves until I was doing around 50 loaves per week. And then at that point, it just started taking a toll on my body. And I knew that I needed to make a change. So I got this mixer. Also, all of the sourdough starter is so satisfying to watch it pour out. That's about probably 7,000 or 8,000 grams of sourdough starter, which is quite a lot. And I'm measuring it out in just a little bit of water to help dilute it a little bit before I put it into the mixer. But all that to say, I chose to get a spiral mixer because it is particularly helpful for bread dough. That is what spiral mixers are for. They are meant to be able to mix really dense, kind of hard to mix things like bagels and regular bread and things like that. This mixer cannot really do anything for like cookies or scones or anything like that because it only has one attachment. It's not like you can change out like to a whisk attachment or something like that, like a KitchenAid. It only has the spiral attachment on it, and the unique thing about this mixer is that the actual bowl itself also spins while the mixer is going. So it's very efficient at mixing bread dough. It was definitely intimidating to learn how to use at first, but I'm really glad that I did. It's definitely helped just the flow of my bakery as a whole. The one downside of spiral mixers is that the actual bowl itself does not remove. It stays on, which makes it a little bit interesting to clean. But it's one of those things where the more you do it, the easier it becomes. It's not really fun, but it's also not that burdensome either. So the key to using a spiral mixer is mixing the dough properly, because if it's mixed properly, it will remove easily from your mixing bowl. If it's not mixed properly, it's going to be super gloopy and just completely stick to the sides of your mixer. So for the most part, your dough should come out like as clean as you can possibly get it when you are taking it out. So basically what I do for my spiral mixer is I add in my water and starter and flour, and then I mix it on the low speed for 10 minutes. And then at that point, I cover the mixing bowl and I let it rest for 30 minutes. And doing this is really going to help kickstart the gluten development, which is also going to be what helps removing the dough from the mixer to become easier. So after that 30-minute rest, I add my salt and like a small portion of water just to kind of dilute the salt a little bit. And then I will mix it on high for like 8 to 10 minutes. And then after it's done mixing that time, I will cover it again and let it rest for 10 minutes just to let it relax a little bit. And then at that point, I remove the dough piece by piece. And I think that I show that later in the video. So that's kind of my little mixer routine, and it works really, really well for us. And also my wrist feels so much better without all of the hand mixing I was doing before. Something that I always recommend for people wanting to start micro bakeries is to just consider what schedule is going to work for you. Now, the sourdough process obviously is a long one, but I think that almost makes it a little bit easier to kind of flex the process to match whatever your needs are demanding. So, for me in this season of life, I like waking up really early and mixing all of my dough before my girls get up. It gives me the ability to just be more present with them during the day, and I've figured out a good routine for myself. So I always feed my starter the day before in the afternoon, and then I start mixing my dough at around 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And then I'm able to do the majority of my shaping and things like that in the afternoon or, late morning, while my girls are eating lunch or taking their naps and things like that. So that works all for me. But I do know other people who like to use different schedules. I know people who don't even start mixing their dough till around noon, and instead they use warm water so that the dough rises faster and they shape at dinner time. And, there's just lots of different options. So I think that's something to keep in mind, that you don't have to do this process exactly like me. Learning how to make sourdough and how dough temperature and things like that affect sourdough will help you find a schedule that actually works for you, so that the dough is working for you and you are not working for the dough. That's really the key there. A question that I'm asked quite often is, are you so tired? Like, how do you wake up at 3:30? Or like, I would totally sleep through my alarm if I had to wake up that early. And here's the thing. Yes, this schedule does make me tired for sure, but I try to do things in a particular way to support my body as best as I can. So on Tuesday and Wednesday nights, I really try to go to bed between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, which can feel difficult for me because sometimes I'm not always tired, but I really try to force myself to go to sleep around that time. But on top of that, I typically try to take a good afternoon rest on those busy, long days. And as far as waking up at my alarms, I think that my body is so anxious about sleeping through my alarms that I've never missed it. So I definitely can sleep through alarms. Like if I have nothing going on for the day, sometimes I sleep through my alarm. But if I have something very like high stress and very important, my body just always wakes up. So that is not a problem for me. Now, what you're seeing in the video right now, I am actually hand mixing some things. So like I said, I do the majority of my mixing exclusively in my mixer. However, there are a few things that I do still mix by hand. First being my pizza crust. Second is baguette dough. So if I'm making baguettes, I'll just do that by hand because it's really not that much dough in comparison to the other stuff that I'm making. And then every once in a while, I'll do a few loaves of classic sourdough mixed by hand, just depending on how many loaves I need for that week. So for example, in this particular week, I sold 30 classic sourdough loaves. In my mixer can only mix 25 at a time. So I didn't want to mix just 5 loaves in another batch in my mixer. It just made way more sense to mix those 5 loaves by hand. So I did that, and that works really well for me. So I feel like I can be a little bit flexible, and it works really well since there's a little bit of a waiting period with the bread that's being mixed in the mixer. I can mix things like this while the other stuff is getting prepared. So every morning I like to get myself ready. So when my dough is mixing in the mixer and I have a little bit of waiting periods after all of my hand mixed stuff is taken care of, I always sit down and sip my cup of coffee and do my makeup. I just feel like this makes me feel a little bit alive. I think that it's kind of one of those things of like mind over matter. So if I'm feeling tired and run down, I just like to make sure that I've gotten myself ready for the day and make sure that I'm feeling good. It just kind of is a fun thing that I do out of routine, really. And I just enjoy it. So I do this every single morning. I like to do my makeup at the dining room table. I sit there, I watch YouTube videos, I sip my coffee, maybe eat a little bit of food, and just kind of enjoy a little bit of peace and quiet before the day gets crazy. This is kind of one of those things that I always just set aside to do for myself, and it always makes me feel a lot better. Of course, there are lots of stretch and folds involved in this little morning routine. You can see that it is still dark outside. It is about 6:30 in the morning at this point. My first load of bread started mixing at 4 a.m. and I do my first starts of stretch and folds around 6:30. So you saw me dip my hands in a little bowl of water, which helps to make sure that the dough doesn't stick to your hands. It creates a little bit of barrier between your hands and the dough. And I do these coil folds. This is definitely the easiest method to build gluten in your bread when you are baking in bulk. So I just kind of go around to each of these bins and do my stretch and folds. For my dough, if it is mixed in a mixer, I do 3 sets of coil folds, and the reason that I still do coil folds is for 2 reasons. Number one, I do still think that the added gluten development is helpful, even though I used a mixer. But the second reason, and really the most important reason, is that the mixer is going to make your dough warmer than it would be otherwise. And I've found that sometimes there are spots in the dough after you remove it from the mixer that are going to be warmer than other spots. And so doing coil folds is going to help ensure that the temperature is a little bit more even throughout, and it just helps distribute that heat a little bit better. So I always recommend doing a few sets of stretch and folds, even if you're using a mixer. I just think it helps the quality of the bread a lot. So for anything that I hand mixed, I do 4 or 5 sets of coil folds. I find that that's best. Also, even if I've hand mixed something, I will do around 4 or 5 sets of coil folds for loaves that have inclusions. So you'll see here in a little bit, this week's special flavor was walnut, cranberries, and dark chocolate chips. And so even though I mixed that dough in the mixer, I'm going to add my inclusions during the first set of coil folds, and I will give that dough a little bit of an extra coil fold or two just to make sure that the special inclusions are really evenly distributed. Okay, so here is the walnut, cranberry, and dark chocolate chip loaf. I kind of eyeball the amount of inclusions that I put in my bread a lot of times, mainly because I just do it so much and I know what the right amount looks like, and I'm able to keep it really consistent. But I generally like to have, if I'm doing a loaf with an inclusion, I do my standard weight of dough and typically like there to be around 100 or 120 grams of whatever inclusions I'm choosing to add. So then I do my stretch and folds for this. One thing to keep in mind if you're doing a loaf with nuts in it, that is that I always do my stretch and folds on this dough last. And I always wash my hands very thoroughly with soap and water after I'm done. But making sure that you do this one last so that there's zero cross-contamination when it comes to touching the dough. My bakery is not nut allergy friendly, so I'm not making any claims to be perfectly safe for people with nut allergies, but I still think it's just good safety practice to make sure that you're keeping that in mind, just in case somebody has a even subtle allergy. You want to make sure that you are keeping that really separate. Okay, so we have our last load of bread coming out of the mixer, and I'm going to show you guys how I remove the dough from the mixer. So you saw I got my hands wet again in that little bowl of water, and then I literally just grab pieces out of the mixer and slowly add it all into the bin. It doesn't take very long. It's kind of meticulous, but it's really not that burdensome at all. It's a little bit entertaining, and I almost just totally dropped dough on the ground, which I've never done before. That would be very tragic, to be honest. I probably should move my bin a little bit closer to where I'm actually getting the dough out of the mixer. I also know that this would probably be easier if I put my mixer on a stand. I don't have it on a stand right now because I don't think I really have the space for it. I'd have to find a really narrow stand because the way that I have my bakery room set up, It kind of fits like a glove with my oven in the left corner, my refrigerator in the right corner, and then my mixer and work table in the middle. It all fits absolutely perfectly, so I'm not sure if I could fit a stand, but I would recommend getting one to make it a little bit more level with a bit of a taller height. So this really isn't too difficult. I try to get out every single last piece of dough so that the mixer is as clean as possible. That's going to make cleaning the mixer significantly easier. And what I do for cleaning my mixer is I will get a measuring cup and squirt, a few squirts of like dish soap into it. And then I will fill probably about a cup's worth of really, really hot water. And then I will go to the mixer, make sure that every piece of dough that's been left behind is scraped out. And then I will use the water and pour it inside, let that hot water get over everything. And then I just use a sponge and kind of scrub it out until everything's clean. And then I just use washcloths to kind of like sop up the water that we used inside. So it's really not too difficult. It takes about 10-15 minutes, and I think it's very worth it in the end. Next, I am working on my labels. This is a little bit of a tedious process, and oftentimes I have my assistant help me with it, but I had the time to do it myself. So all of these labels were printed on my mun bin that you guys got to see me use earlier, and it just works really well for me. It's a nice and simple process. One tip that I have for your labels is to make sure that you are labeling in accordance to whatever cottage food laws you have in your area. It can vary from state to state, so keep that in mind. But at this point, what I'm doing is I am writing names on the bags. So I do pre-order pickup only for my bakery. So everything that I bake has already been paid for. And so on each bag, I am writing names for the people that ordered so that when they go to the pickup location that they chose, they can find the stuff with their name on it, just grab it and go. So it is quite the ordeal, but it works really, really well. And it's very rare that I have any mishaps with pickups with things like this. So works well. I use Hot Plate to track all of my orders, and it's just a matter of writing the correct names on the bags. Thank you guys so much for tagging along with me on today's video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you enjoy this micro bakery content and want to follow along for more, please make sure that you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe down below. I would love to have you follow along on my little journey here. I also share a lot about motherhood and homemaking and cooking from scratch and all of those fun things. I also am very active, mainly active really, over on Instagram. So that's kind of where this all started. And I love sharing real-time updates with you guys and just a little bit more in-depth micro bakery content over there as well. So make sure you follow me on Instagram. I am so thankful for you guys. This is such a fun little community, and I can't believe that we are really inching closer to 10,000 followers. Such an amazing blessing. So thank you for being here. Thank you to Munbin for sponsoring today's video. I am so thankful for them. Make sure that you check out the link in my bio for that if you want a bit of a discount, and I will see you guys in my next video.